Okay, so welcome everyone to our webinar series. It's called Feminist Leadership in Disarmament 3.0, Advocating General and Complete Disarmament with Gender and Intersectionality. My name is Vanessa Canola. I'm a project assistant at Scrap Weapons, and I'm an international security studies student at Charles University in Prague. Last year, I worked for the delegation of the European Union to the UN in Geneva in the disarmament section. So that's the reason why I'm here. And I'm now involved in several initiatives also to continue this journey in the disarmament field as well. So basically, I will start by giving you a brief overview of Scrap's work. And then after that, I will also introduce our webinar series, and I will give the floor to our speakers. So in order to understand what actually Scrap does, we need to understand what Scrap Weapons is. So Scrap actually means strategic concept for the removal of arms and proliferation project. So it is a project that aims to reframe the debate around general and complete disarmament. And it is housed at the Center of International Studies and Diplomacy at SOAS University of London. Scrap's main objective is actually achieving the legal obligation of all nations to negotiate general and complete disarmament. And the idea of general and complete disarmament is actually not new, because it has long been set by the NAM, so the non-aligned movement within the UN, and it was present in several proposals and also US-Soviet proposal, and also in initiatives such as President Kennedy's plan for general and complete disarmament. So at present, Scrap Weapons is building a long constituency to request that the UN Secretariat reactivates the General Assembly's mechanism of a special session devoted to disarmament. And basically, what is our role? So we call on states, including on governments and representatives, to support the activation for a fourth special session on disarmament, the United Nations General Assembly, and its inclusion in the new Agenda for Peace. So we invite everybody, as well as our partner organizations, to support this initiative by writing to the UN Secretariat the reviews, priorities, and also potential recommendations for a new Agenda for Peace. You can actually find the email in the chat for writing to the UN Secretariat. And then, of course, you can also read more on what Scrap Weapons does and on our website at www.scrapweapons.com, but you can also find it in the chat. And we will also send you our information pack there. So in case you want to find more information, please do so in the chat. So as I mentioned before, our webinar series is entitled Feminist Leadership in Disarmament 3.0, but why 3.0 actually? So this number for us is very important because this is the third year that actually our initiative is going on with a series of webinar research and publications on discussing the role of women and its linkage with disarmament issues. So for this year, we chose gender and intersectionality regarding disarmament. Intersectionality can be defined as a prism foreseeing the way in which various forms of inequality actually operate together and exacerbate each other, such as gender, caste, sex, race, ethnicity, class, sexuality, religion, disability, and also the environment plays a crucial role. So this is the case that we will deal with today. At first glance, intersectionality and disarmament may seem completely disconnected. However, if closer inspection reveals that women of color, migrant women, indigenous women, poor women, and other groups are disproportionately affected by the systems of power, weapons, and security. So today's webinar is entitled Gender, Environment, and Disarmament, and we will focus on the convergence of indigenous rights, climate justice, and disarmament. Yes, so before starting with the webinar, I would like to go through a little housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded, so you can find it on YouTube and our channel in the next couple of days. So yeah, please follow us for finding the webinar and for re-listening it again. Once the speakers have given their presentation, we will open up the floor for a brief Q&A session. So please add your questions via the Q&A function. And you can also type your name and affiliation so we can keep each other in contact. So after this long introduction that was supposed to be brief, I would like to introduce the first speaker. So the first speaker that we have the pleasure to host here is Betty Rathule. Yes. And she is a Marshallese Pohnpeian woman who grew up in Hawaii and now lives in the Fiji. So she is connected from there. She began her work in the nuclear disarmament space by performing advocacy work alongside Mr. for Pacific, a grassroots Marshall Islands youth organization in Sua, Fiji, which aims to raise solidarity for Pacific issues, including nuclear justice. Betty is now engaged as an interning ecumenical enabler for climate justice at the Pacific Conference of Churches, where she works to link faith, culture, climate, nuclear, and ocean issues. Betty also serves as a team leader at Bok Imna, a youth climate justice organization in the Marshall Islands, as a co-chair of the Nuclear Truth Project, which is an organization that connects Indigenous, First Nations, and affected communities of nuclear weapons. Okay, so over to you, Betty. You can share your screen and you can start with your presentation. So I will mute myself just in case.
Sorry about that. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Everything is fine. So yes, you can start.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for that lovely introduction. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It's an honor to represent my organization as well as youth from the Pacific and women from the Pacific. So to speak on this topic of intersectionality and disarmament, which I am very passionate about. So I would like to dedicate my speaking time today to the powerful women of the Pacific who have called for a nuclear-free and independent region. The first is my personal hero, Miss Darlene Keju, who was considered one of the first women to platform our issues on a global stage. And she worked really hard to share the plight of women who are facing stillbirths and birth defects in the Marshall Islands. And she died of cancer at age 45. And the second is Gabriela Ngirimao from Palau, who led a women's group called Otila Balaud, or Anchor of Our Land, to achieve the world's first and only nuclear-free constitution. And she was faced with threats to her life, her family's life, and her home was even firebombed. And another woman that I'd like to pay tribute to is my friend, Hina Cross, who is a lawyer, Maohi nuclear justice advocate, and cancer survivor, a great ally, and a great warrior in the fight for nuclear justice. These are just a few of the women. There are many more. I wish I had time to name them all, but I'd just like to highlight some so that we can pay tribute to all the hardworking women who have contributed so much to this movement. Before I begin, I just want to introduce a little bit about my island because I will be talking very much about the Marshall Islands. And I would like for my home not to be only represented by nuclear tests and devastation, but also for the beautiful oceanic culture and environment. So this is the Marshall Islands here. It's located in the North Pacific, and it's a group of 34 islands which are scattered across the ocean. We consider the ocean to be part of our home and not a void that we travel through. The Marshall Islands are known for their intricate handicrafts and having some of the best canoe builders and wayfinders that the world has ever known. I would like to begin by...
Sorry for the interruption. I think we are facing some problems with the slides because we can just see this slide with a title. So I don't know why, actually.
Can you see it now?
Okay, now it's great. Yes, now it's working. That's perfect.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Well, here are the three women that I was speaking about. You can see them now. That's Darlene, Gabriella, and Hina. And here's a map of the Pacific that shows where the Marshall Islands is. And here are some photos from home of the handicrafts and canoes. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So here's where I left off. I was hoping to introduce a background of nuclear testing in the Pacific region. As some of you might know, there were 315 nuclear explosions conducted by France, UK, and the United States, spread all throughout the Pacific, as you can see on this map. And here's a little timeline. Only 1 year after the Hiroshima bombs, the US began testing in the Marshall Islands. Then the UK began testing in Australia, Kiribati, and the US continued their tests in Johnston Atoll, and France began testing in French Polynesia all the way up until the 90s, after I was born, which I was really surprised to learn. In the Marshall Islands, the US detonated a total of 67 nuclear and hydrogen bombs. And the largest one is Castle Bravo, which was detonated on Bikini. And it is about 1,000 times stronger than the Hiroshima bombs and Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. So these hydrogen bombs were extremely powerful and caused a lot of devastation to the islands. As you can see, this huge crater was left behind after the nuclear test, and a little islet on one of our atolls was even eviscerated from existence. After the testing in the Marshall Islands, people from nearby atolls and fishing boats were exposed to the fallout. Survivors on Rongelap Atoll, they thought that the fallout was snow and they began to play with it, and later on became really, really sick with radiation poisoning. One woman from Rongelap said that she recalled that the water had turned yellowish and the food was bitter. So there was really no care taken to protect the people from neighboring atolls from fallout. Then the people on Bikini who were removed and relocated had to continue living their lives in new settlements that had lacked inadequate food, water, sanitation, and health. And there were stories that some of them were even barred from attending the hospital at Kwajalein Air Base, which was only reserved for military personnel. And so many people, especially children, died from sanitation sickness. All over the Pacific, there are similar impacts from the testing, which include high rates of cancer, including thyroid, leukemia, and breast cancer. And women began giving birth to what they called jellyfish babies, which were babies born without bones or eyes, and the reef was damaged, causing food poisoning in the people. The government officials in charge of the test made many claims to cover up the true impacts of the test. And one of those impacts was Project 4.1, in which the people of Rongelap Atoll were told that their islands were safe and forced to live on them so that the US could study the impact of radiation on human beings. So The people on Rongelap, especially the mothers, were really concerned about their children because they kept having birth defects and they had never seen babies born the way that they were being born after the test. And they were pleading to be relocated from Rongelap, but the US either refused or told them that if they moved, they would no longer receive any compensation for their health. So it was a very difficult situation for them. They were only removed after 30 years after Greenpeace stepped in. So this is a quote from the Brookhaven National Laboratory, which is one of the declassified documents, saying leaving the people of Rongelap on the contaminated atoll will afford valuable radiation data on human beings. So our people were essentially treated like guinea pigs. It's no secret that nuclear weapons, nuclear colonialism in the Pacific is underlined with racism. And as you can see from the Marshallese experience, that is true, but also in Kiritimati Atoll, Suri Kiritome said that when they were observing the bombs from the boat deck, everyone was wearing protective clothing while the indigenous community were only wearing their normal clothes. And the Fijian troops that served on this island, one of their grandsons whom I worked with, told a story of how Fijian soldiers were made to do work that the UK soldiers didn't want to do. So like dumping nuclear waste and stuff. It was really sad to read this quote by President Harry Truman, who said, "It is a terrible weapon and should not be used on innocent men, women, and children." This was said after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. Sorry. But apparently our people were not considered men, women, children, or human beings because they were tested. They had nuclear weapons tested on them. So some of the ongoing impacts of the test, they're really lengthy and it would take a long time to go through all of them, but the Marshallese people who fled to the US were disproportionately dying from COVID or impacted by COVID-19 because of pre-existing health conditions and inadequate provisions for healthcare. As an immigrant to the US, I was a COFA citizen who had my healthcare expire when I turned 18, and we weren't provided quality healthcare due to an anomaly in the system. We were basically forgotten about. Then studies have shown that the radioactive waste at the Runit Dome is leaking due to rising sea level. Surprisingly, there are no cancer facilities in the Marshall Islands to treat cancer patients, which means that families have to uproot their lives to relocate to the US or Philippines or other places where there are treatment facilities. And another ongoing impact is that the compensation funds are depleted because the US did not take into account the illegal experiments and they downplayed a lot of the impacts, which meant that the compensation they offered was not adequate to pay for the damage that was caused. So climate change and nuclear weapons, studies have shown that detonating nuclear weapons will in fact impact the climate. However, for the Pacific region, the impacts are much deeper. So as you can see here, this is Bikini Atoll. And this is, the people of Bikini were relocated. Some of them were relocated to Kele Atoll. And a friend of mine whose grandmother lived there, she told us the story of how during the king tides, their home would be flooded and the island would be pretty much almost entirely underwater. So this is the island that the Bikini people were relocated to And as you can see, it's just a small island without a lagoon. So the Bikini people couldn't practice their traditional methods of fishing or getting food, planting, because they had such limited land. So they began to become dependent on imported foods, which increased their likelihood of contracting NCDs, and also loss of their cultural practices. So they no longer pass down the practice of fishing, and the loss and damage from being relocated due to nuclear and climate change is not just material, but it's also spiritual and cultural. Like when you lose connection to your land, it's a really traumatizing thing for Pacific Islanders, because we consider our island to be, you know, a part of us. So till this day, if you meet a someone from Bikini, even though they're young, they've never been there, they will say, I'm from Bikini, although they've never stepped foot on their island. That's how deep and strong that connection is. So, as you know, militarism continues to cause more damage to the islands, and the world's militaries are some of the highest emitters of greenhouse gases. But it's ironic that billions of dollars are being spent to produce more weapons, but there is no money to pay for the loss and damage that Indigenous communities are facing. And it takes extreme inconsideration to even threaten to use nuclear weapons while communities are suffering under the weight of climate change. So the very same attitudes which regarded our islands and oceans as nuclear playgrounds are still around. And I really want to highlight the connection to nuclear power and militarism, because in a lot of spaces, this is not considered relevant to the discussion on disarmament. But for us in the Pacific, and when we talk about the environment, it's really important. So these same attitudes now shift to viewing our islands as nuclear dumping grounds or nuclear highways for submarines or other military vessels. And our region is still being viewed as a military playground and a frontier for extraction. The solution to that is to, when we talk about disarmament, we have to think about demilitarization, decolonization, having just and safe transition to renewable energy, rethinking development and geopolitics, and what we at PCC called reweaving the ecological map. And that is considering development with ecology, with culture, with faith, considering our responsibility and roles to be good stewards of the earth when we make decisions for development, and not placing profit over people. So this is something that we try and hope to advocate for, and it has been an honor to work with PCC to carry out this work. And I would like to leave with a quote, to end with a quote by Darlene Keju, and she said, "Don't be afraid to sail through rough currents to get to the next island." This quote means a lot to me because, as you can see, there are so many different intersections, so many different impacts and burdens that are facing the Pacific, but it is stories like Darlene's and the many women who have stood up to fight oppression and nuclear colonialism that we can do the work that we do today. So that is all I want to share with you today, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation first, but especially for your work, which is really precious, because actually people need to know more about the implication of nuclear weapons and also nuclear tests, which are often overlooked. So it's really important that you're spreading awareness of this. And also thank you for mentioning the brave women that you're sharing your path with, which is also really important, because they are giving hope, I think, to us and they are pushing us to do more to counter what happened and what's happening right now in the moment. And I've been in Hiroshima with Tamato as well. So basically we saw with our eyes the destruction that the atomic bomb caused there. And it was already horrible. I cannot even imagine what happened actually in your islands, because you said it was like the destruction was 1,000 times stronger than what happened in Hiroshima. So I cannot even imagine. And yeah, again, thank you very much for pinpointing this and for your contribution. So now I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, Tamatoa Tepuihari, who is a Mahoe graduate student, so indigenous from French Polynesia, youth delegate of the Mahoe Protestant Church and prospective PhD student in anthropology. His main involvement remains in the Mahoe Protestant Church through various youth gatherings in Mahoe Nui, in the Pacific and some countries around the world as a youth leader. As a Mahoe representative, he strongly hopes for an engaged youth generation guided by both indigenous knowledge and faith regarding our Pacific issues, and particularly nuclear injustices. His main adventures in his living experience awaken him to acknowledge, act, and stand up for youth training and nuclear justice by providing accurate scientific content about the radiation-induced pathologies related to 30 years of French nuclear testing, Mahoe Nui, French Polynesia. As the wise proverb states, it's more blessed to give than receive. Tamatoa wants to personify the statement through his involvement so as to learn, gain skills with the ultimate goal of returning home, serving and protecting his community, which is also really important. So thank you for telling us your mission, and we really appreciate. So now over to you, Tamatoa. You can share your screen and start with your presentation. So thank you very much again for being here.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa, for this nice presentation. Let me try to find how can I share my screen. Yeah, it might be okay.
Take your time, no worries. There is no rush. So.
Here we go. Yeah. I think I might be all set right now. Here we go.
Okay. Yes. Now we can
you
see
guys
it.
can see my presentation. Let me try to make it. Is that okay?
Okay, that's perfect. Yes, here we are.
Okay. Tell me, guys, if you can, see the movement of the slides, because sometimes, So yes, thank you, Vanessa, for this opportunity to share, some points on nuclear issues that we are facing here in Maui Nui, also known as French occupied Polynesia. So it's a great pleasure for us. I mean, for me and for my whole community, because we deeply believe that when someone is speaking, it's the whole community who is speaking as well. So we acknowledge this time, this opportunity for sharing some points that we can highlight, and also, just to share our issues on nuclear weapons here. So I'm trying to, continue with what Betty mentioned in her presentation, like the different impacts. And I trying to, just to write this broad theme of gender, environment, and disarmament, or a relationship with some narrow topic that I named here with communities, climate change, and faith for the future. So yes, first I want to acknowledge that I'm deeply agreed with Bedi's presentation, and particularly these points of impacts that we have in the Pacific regarding nuclear testing. First of all, I just want to mention that we are facing slightly the same situation here in Maohinui, French Polynesia, regarding the impacts with compensation issues, with medical care or medical treatments issues and everything like that, because of this colonial, mindset of pressure that we have here in the Pacific, which is, really challenging for the people and particularly for the communities to heal themselves and to, just acknowledge nuclear testing as one of the main theme and important theme for our population, for the communities, for the Maori people. So as I was mentioning, the first point that I want to highlight is communities. And because we are talking about a feminist disarmament leadership, so I will focus on women. So this is, regarding this point, I can highlight one of the recent studies which has been done, couple of days ago, and it has been done for years. So this new study is coming from the INSERM, which is the National Institute of Health and Medical Research in France. This is the second epidemiological health study on people as a whole. Not only this study doesn't consider only former workers on nuclear sites, but also people as a whole. So we are counting like 300,000 people from 2021 here in French Polynesia. And they have been like more than 5,000 people working on nuclear sites. So this second epidemiological study is really important to, to acknowledge the real impacts of nuclear testing, which are the sources of thyroid cancers. And for less than 10% of the cases, the cases of thyroid cancers that we are facing in Maohinui. And particularly here, we have the thyroid cancers or really deeply concerning the women in Maohinui, and like 80% of women in Maohinui got thyroid cancers. So which is really important to highlight and to acknowledge, to find solutions for these people. But the challenging point here is like the medical files of former workers who have been partially, published, but it's still complicated to analyze this medical data of people in the 70s or 80s to see the connection or the relationship between the nuclear testing and these radiation-induced cancers. So we have two different kinds, like we are doing a whole study on nuclear testing, but on the other side, it's really complicating to analyze the data, because we need more research, we need more, more research, and we need to go through that. So the solution that I'm just thinking is like to call on indigenous people to do research and help Maori people, not only to count on other people or scientists, Western scientists, but this nuclear testing issue is something that everyone needs to be involved in. And the second point is the climate change and nuclear testing, which are a double exposure. As we know, guys, climate change and nuclear testing are like, incidents cannot be separated. And we can say that in the Pacific, they are the fruits of global geopolitics. So we do also acknowledge that the G7 countries are more going towards, more power, but at what scale and at what is the importance of getting more and more power, and which is like impacting the Pacific issues. So we have first nuclear testing, and the second point, we are like facing climate change. So we can say that developing countries, I put it, in two different, because I don't like this appellation, calling developing countries, but we can say that our countries are sacrificing themselves for the G7 agenda. I can just give you guys some examples that we are facing, about double exposures. The first one is going to be the flooding. We got flooding in 2015 here in Papenoo, and we got recently flooding here in Tiahupo in April 2023. On the image on your left, I think, down, you can see, the two pictures of flooding that we are facing. We also have the whitening of corals, and I can also, highlight the sea level rise in the Marshall Islands. So yes, those are the first examples. Now, regarding these examples, we need more nuclear justice. So it means we need more research, we need more institutions, we need more truth and justice in the research and the institutions. And as I was mentioning a couple of minutes ago, we need more youth involved in this justice. So it also means that we need more like medical treatments and politics to give a structure for the people and trying to find, solutions for our people. Concerning the adaptation, there's adaptation plans for Whenua from the land, which already begun, but there's still no news on rising seas or corals whitening. There's still, we can say that there's still like ongoing studies, but what about the politics? Or what about education program for the people? We don't even have these solutions. So we need to put these adaptations. So as we got like double exposures, we don't want a third exposures. And when I talked about third exposure, I just want to mention the dumping of nuclear waste that Fukushima is about to do by this year. So this is gonna be, this dumping of nuclear waste is gonna be the third exposure for our people. And we don't need that. We don't want that. And yes. So talking about faith for the future, as we are talking about women advocacy, I just want to highlight, as Bedi mentioned later, about Hinamwe Urakros, who is one of the, women advocate and activist on nuclear justice. She has been impacted by radiation-induced cancer as well. She got leukemia, and now she's trying to do her best to advocate for nuclear justice all over the world. She has been doing that last year, and now she's also doing that in the indigenous government here, in the local government. Now, I just want to mention other friend of mine who is Thierry Maohit Eirua, who has been advocating for nuclear justice at the United Nations, with another friend of mine, TVRA, that I do respect. But regarding this advocacy, or this youth, women advocacy, nowadays, it might not be possible if we don't have the support of our ancestors, if we don't have the support of the parents who had been advocating for nuclear justice before us. So the reason why women or people or can advocate for nuclear justice, for nuclear weapons, for nuclear disarmament, and everything around nuclear weapons is because people before advocated for that. As my friend Bedi mentioned, the 3 women that she considered, and here we can see, more Pacific women, Pacific people advocating for nuclear justice as well. I will just end up with an important, I will just finish up this presentation with an important, quote that I can share with you guys, which is Etupitavo Yaoi Itifaro in my indigenous language, which means that I'm gonna explode you with faith. I'm gonna explode you with faith, because I strongly believe, and we strongly believe, that if people are trusting, if people are having faith, this faith will give hope to do actions. This faith will give hope to women or to all the communities to stay there for their own communities. And I just want also to mention another quote that that we got for the Australian National University conference in April this year, in last April, which states that to hell with drowning, which means that our people in the Pacific won't die as long as our community are advocating for them. And this is really strong, because this is really, just reminding us the importance of standing up for our people and to do actions, to find solutions. We are not like, expecting or waiting for actions or for solutions from abroad, but how can we collaborate together? How can we find solutions together for our people? And how can we train the new generations to be the next campaigners of truth and justice? So thank you again, and I'm gonna stop here.
Thank you very much, Tamato. It was really inspiring. I mean, I'm also surprised to hear that 80% of women in Mahoi Nui are affected by cancer, but this is just one of the effects. So we need to hear more voices. We need, as you said, we need to have more research. Yep. And I'm also involved, or trying to be involved in research. So I would be also glad to contribute to raise awareness of this, because, there are so many voices, but they need platforms to be heard. And this is also part of our mission. This is also what Scrap is doing in our little, of course. But we need to do more, and we need also to convince the G7 countries to do something, because they have the resources, they have the funding. They could do better, they should do better, but probably they need to be pushed, to be influenced, to be stimulated in a sense to do better. So yeah, why not? We should do it, as you said. The power. So the youth has the power, and we should cooperate more to do more as well. So thank you very much also for your presentation. And I'm so glad that we are finally hearing something different, I would say, rather than other than deterrence or, balance of power. No, we need to cooperate more to hear these voices. So this is really, really important. And now I'm glad to introduce my dear colleague, I would say, Mona Lisa Azarica. And yeah, so basically she's a master's student in conflict management and development at Banaras Hindu University in India. She's also one of the Leaders for Tomorrow and Leaders to Future under the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, UNODA, Youth for Disarmament Initiative. Last year, Mona Lisa was invited to the UN headquarters in New York to present her project Across the Chicken Neck, a product of her lived experiences in one of the politically volatile and highly militarized zones of Southeast Asia. At the first committee side event held in October 2022. She is interested in the nexus between the illicit small arms and light weapons and narco-insurgency and the organized crime in South and Southeast Asia. Her other project, Nuclear Lives, unfolding the legacy of uranium mining on the indigenous communities of Meghalaya, was a finalist in the 2023 PACE Awards organized by the Basel Peace Forum. Currently, she's working as a project assistant at Scrap Weapons, yes, and is part of the Emerging Voices Network of the British American Security Information Council. Okay, so after this brief presentation, I would leave the floor to you, Mona Lisa, to speak about uranium mining and on indigenous lands. So thank you very much in advance.
Thank you, Vanessa. I'll just quickly share my screen and then get started. I hope you guys can see my screen.
Yes, we can. So far, so good. Everything is fine.
Yeah. Okay. So, greetings, everyone. My name is Monalisa Hazarika, and it's an absolute honor to share the space with such inspiring speakers. And many thanks for Vanessa for your very kind introduction. My name is Monalisa Hazarika. I'm a master's student at Banaras University and a Leaders for Tomorrow and Leaders to Future under the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs. Today, I will be talking about the impact of uranium mining on indigenous lands and communities with special reference to the state of Meghalaya in India. Now, quickly to contextualize my topic, I will be talking briefly about my region, which is Northeast India, which is the peripheral border area connected to quote unquote mainland India by a 21-kilometer strip of land called the Chicken Neck at the Siliguri corridor. It comprises of 7 Indian states, as you can see in the map there, and shares 98% of its borders internationally with China, Bhutan, Myanmar, Nepal, and Bangladesh, and hence is of major geostrategic importance for its porous borders, its vicinity to the Golden Triangle, and also the rich stockpile of natural resources. It is inhabited by over 250 indigenous communities. I come from one of the communities called Kosras Wangsi, and also other ethnic groups of the Mongoloid stock, but unfortunately has been widely underrepresented on national and international forums. So today, our focus would be on one of the states, which is Meghalaya.
I'm not sure if it's my connection or not.
Which literally
Yeah.
translates to abode of
Sorry, Monalisa, we
9.2.
had we had a problem with the connection, I think. So we lost you for a second. Can you please restart? Yeah, exactly.
I am so sorry.
No
Am
worries.
I audible now?
Yeah, now you're audible. No worries at all. It can happen. I mean, it happens all the time, so it's fine.
Okay,
You're used to
I'll
this,
just
so no big deal.
I'll just restart.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I
Yep.
was I audible for at least the
Yes.
slide?
So yeah, we heard this. Okay, from here onwards, yeah, we lost you. So yeah, start from here. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, yes. So I was talking about Meghalaya, which is one of the 7 states in Northeast India. And Meghalaya literally translates to the abode of clouds for its scenic beauty and the rich heritage. It is inhabited primarily by 3 tribal groups, that is the Garo, Khasi, and Jaintia. The most important factor here is that this state has an estimate of 9.2 million tons of high-grade uranium, which is the highest in the entire country. So it also has one of the last striving matrilineal societies in the world, where women play a critical role in decision-making and ownership of land, which is again very unique to the region and also to the country. Now, talking about the problem of uranium mining in Meghalaya is that this community had to face the burden of our country's nuclear dreams when the Atomic Minerals Directorate, AMD, found traces of uranium back in the 1970s. So this is the case of uranium mining in the village of Domiasiat, which is a village of just 6 households. It all began in 1975 when AMD conducted aerial surveys and found traces of uranium, followed by exploratory mining from 1980s in villages across Meghalaya as part of the KPM project. So it is around this time that the villagers started noticing the visible after effects of expeditions such as water bodies turning acidic, the rise in cases of stillborn birds, and also death of local wildlife. By 1990, the village matriarch, Ms. Pelletilingdo Langri, asked the authorities to leave her village, and so began the era of the longest running anti-uranium protest. Despite the strong opposition, the Uranium Corporation of India Limited, UCIL, started its pre-project survey from 2000.
I think there are some problems with the connection again.
The neighboring Mauthoba area, as you can see.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry.
No,
Is it
it's,
okay
it's fine. No worries, no worries. Continue from the 2000 onwards. Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I think my internet is just giving up today.
It's okay, no worries.
Okay, so I was saying that despite the strong opposition, the Uranium Corporation of India Limited started its pre-project survey in 2000, and by 2009 was allowed to mine in the neighboring Mauthoba area. This was met by, of course, strong resistance from the local student bodies and indigenous communities of that area. And after almost a decade of petitions, political lobbying, and advocacy efforts, the government had to halt its activity in 2018. But of course, the issue did not just stop there. The KPM project resulted in over 650 tons of contaminated tailings, which were left unprotected at the mining sites. The concrete pits that were later created had reports of leakages from the locals. A bot job was done by the ministry, which was recently uncovered by the notable environmentalist and whistleblower, Dr. Bramley Lingdo, in October 2020. His US-made Geiger counter recorded ionizing radiation of 1,093 counts per minute from one spot, while the radiation levels fluctuated between 235 to 315 counts per minute in other areas, pointing at, of course, the irreversible damage that has already been done. But while the AMD and authorities deny such claims made by the locals as baseless and unscientific, the rampant increase in cases of miscarriage, deformities in newborn children, and cancer says otherwise. Further, Domyasiat is not the only village in Meghalaya to possess uranium, as neighboring villages of Wakhan and Lostoin have India's largest and richest sandstone-type uranium deposits. Of course, the demonstration conducted in Domyasiat are a classic example of the successful youth-led movement. But at what cost? The villages do not even have access to the basic amenities and services like water supply, electricity, healthcare, or even concrete roads for transportation, as you can see in the picture there. The children here have to travel every day to the neighboring village, as their own does not even have a primary school. This is the price that the people had to pay for saying no to the project, the KPM project. Like Vanessa mentioned, I created a project called Nuclear Lives, which was basically an interview series which highlighted the stories of the victims to this uranium mining. So shown in the slide are the victims who bear witness to the leakage and who suffer the ramification of India's nuclear dreams. The legacy left behind by the uranium has made their lives nuclear, hence the name Nuclear Lives. But all of this was made possible by the unwavering efforts and decade-long protest by the village matriarch, Ms. Peliti Lingdo Langren, as shown in the picture, who was a farmer and a homemaker from Domyasiat, who despite being offered 1.5 crore, which is 10.5 million of Indian currency, for her land, for a 30 years lease for her land, rejected the offer. Her courageous story helped highlight the suppressed history of one of the disenfranchised communities in the world, which is often left out of the narrative when we talk about nuclear weapons and the impact and the source of fuel for those nuclear weapons. Now, you must be wondering what can be done in this case, right? So we need independent research to recenter the focus on the humanitarian picture behind the current facts and figures. Moreover, we need to refresh the debate and database to back up the substantial claims made by both the parties, and also to pave the way for policy recommendations. Efforts at documenting the testimonies of victims who bear witness to the leakage and suffer the ramification of the nuclear dreams will help bridge the gap in available research with a focus on the legacy left behind by UCIL. And since the activities of UCIL were halted after 2019's Supreme Court of India's ruling on the ownership of land, and of course, a special provision is available in our constitution, in the sixth schedule of our constitution for the indigenous communities, this was brought into play. And of course, it's been long overdue that we need to record and examine the ground realities of these villages today. To develop a holistic understanding of the matter, of course, we need to take into account the lived experiences and findings of the native inhabitants, the activists, grassroots NGOs, student bodies, local authorities, militant groups, scientists, and experts from academia. So as you can see, there are multiple factors at play. It's an issue with intersectional impacts. A lot is at stake. It is a matter that poses great risk for human health, ethnic sovereignty, keeping native land and resources in the hands of the community, and protecting livelihoods and customs endangered by the efforts of mainstreaming nuclearism. So to highlight the stories of my region, I created an education program called Across the Chicken Neck, which aims to highlight the intersectional nature of disarmament and arms control with special emphasis and reference to the indigenous communities of Northeast India. It explores the multifaceted field with speakers and lecturers from across the globe via an interactive educational module, which links disarmament with armed conflict, gender, race, climate change, illicit trade in small arms, and of course, narcotics. The project was first presented at the first committee side event in October 2022 and was officially launched in March of this year as part of a 5-week long educational program with lectures supplemented by a comprehensive toolkit, which I would like to call the Open Resource Library, containing a compilation of detailed reading materials on the topics that we addressed during this 5-week long course. The prime objective was to accentuate the importance of disarmament education among youth and in learning about the current international security challenges and build a network of young people advocating for their cause in their respective societies. This is a screenshot from the course. The project is a product of my lived experiences in one of the most politically volatile and highly militarized zone of South Asia. This initiative is a homage to my community, which has been scourged by armed conflict due to undue presence of numerous insurgent groups and a vibrant arms market funded by drug cartels that has mainstream violence and ingrained a culture of resistance over the years. The prime motive of this project was to voice the concerns of indigenous communities living in this highly militarized zones, and also addressing issues that often fly under the radar due to its low intensity status. It is imperative that we bring these issues out of the durable disorder and ensure greater representation of indigenous youth at the global level. That's all from me. Thank you so much for your attention, and absolutely apologize for the inconvenience. Thank you.
Really, no need to apologize. We heard everything. And yeah, I want to say thank you again for introducing this specific topic, because actually I really don't think that a lot of people know about this, especially outside India. So your project was also inspiring. It is, yeah, I'm using the word inspiring a lot, but I mean, I really mean it. To actually inform other people, especially in Europe and in the US, on what's going on in your region. So yeah, I'm glad that it was a success, but I'm also pretty sure that this is just the beginning and this is not the end, even though the project came to an end, but I'm sure you will work on that even more. And we encourage to do so because we need this specific type of information. We need to convince academia that there are also other topics, as I said before, that need attention, not only the standard topic we are mostly discussing. So it's great that you had that you were so brave to, let's say, to be inspired by what's happening in your region, that you didn't want to be silent about it. You wanted to be vocal, and we really appreciated a lot your effort, and I'm sure that it's going to be inspirational for a lot of other young students that have exactly the same that see that there is a problem and that want to do something about it. So thank you very much for doing this. And okay, so I think that we reached, not I think, I mean, we actually reached the end of our panels. So now we can open the floor for a brief Q&A. So basically you can write your questions for our speakers in the Q&A chat box. And I see, wait, I see that there is a comment here. Maybe it's not a question, but it's a comment. Gurpreet says, just want to say that both Vanessa and Betty have raised a very important point, the limits of imagination. How do we articulate something that is beyond the limits of imagination? This is a really tough question, honestly. This is a challenge we face when pushing for disarmament because the horrors are so big that it pushes against the limits of the human mind. Thank you. So thank you very much, Gurpreet, for your comment. It's very much appreciated. And let's see if we have a few more questions. No. So far, we don't have questions. Let's check again just to be sure. No, okay. So I came prepared because I knew this could have been an option. So basically, yeah, I have three questions, so one each. So I would like to start with Betty to follow the order of the presentations. So basically, I was reading a little bit the news, as we all do, I imagine. And actually, I read that the Japanese government unilaterally declared that it would start discharging Fukushima nuclear contaminated water into the sea this spring and summer, despite the global resistance and opposition. So basically, what is your opinion of Japan's moves and what can we do about it? So what can we do to practically oppose this? How can we convince Japan not to do that? So that would be first question. Over to you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for the question, and also wanted to share my appreciation to Tamatoa and Mona Lisa for the wonderful presentations. It's been really good to share the solidarity on these issues and learn about the different impacts. To answer your question, I believe that Japan had planned to dump nuclear waste into the Pacific once before in the 70s in the Northern Marianas, and that plan has been thwarted before, and I don't see why that plan can be thwarted again. I think dumping nuclear waste into the ocean sets a precedent for how other companies and countries will regard our ocean in the future. So I don't know the answer for what to do to solve this issue, but I do know that we can continue to raise our voices, and it's really important to keep doing so to let not only Japan, but our Pacific leaders and our own leaders across the world know that we don't approve of this type of development that places money and development over people's lives and over the environment. And it has been shown that there is a lack of research to prove that the dumping won't impact our marine resources. So can hardly say that the science is sound. But yeah, that's what I would say. For us to continue to raise our voices, this does not have to be a Pacific issue. This can be a global issue because nuclear waste dumping takes place all over the world and can impact us because the ocean has no borders, or as we like to say at MISA, my fish is your fish. What happens in our corner of the ocean will impact you in your corner of the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, exactly. Research can change the narratives, so we can be involved, let's say, with that, of course, but we should raise our voice. So this is, I think, the key point that we can keep with us for the future from this webinar. So we should do more and we should discuss these topics. So yes, thank you very much again. Okay, now I see here that there is another question. Okay, so I will stop with the questions I prepared to give space to this, of course. So Ruari says, I hope to pronounce your name correctly. Brilliant presentation, so thanks. In relation to low intensity discussions for Mona Lisa, I wonder whether she has seen any discussions surrounding victims of uranium mining in discussions during the TPNW as they discuss victim assistance. Should there be more? So I think this is a question for you, Mona Lisa, so feel free to answer.
Thank you, Ruari. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrect. And thank you for your question. But this is definitely that's something that we have been trying to bring up in these discussions. I'm sure as a delegate to the Youth TPNW, I know Vanessa is a part, and Zara is also a youth delegate to the TPNW. So most of the discussions are framed around, and for good reason, of course, around the victims of nuclear testing. But the source of the nuclear fuel is often very overlooked because I think, like we have been talking about in this webinar series, that lack of proper research, right? That we need to engage more and more on ground-based research and stop, expecting others to do, mostly from the West, to do our research on the cases that we face, right? So my answer to your question would be that no, as I definitely did not see any mentions of victims of uranium mining. There's definitely an increased awareness about nuclear testing, but not as much as the impact of uranium mining from environmental or social impact point of view. So this is definitely something that we should be bringing about more and more. And that is possible only when maybe from our advocacy efforts, from projects, from maybe just writing an article, writing a blog about it. So making people aware about it. Because I'm sure that even within my country, not a lot of people know about the stories in Meghalaya, even though it's one of the states, one of the 29 states in my country, but very few people know that there are traces of uranium in that state. Because of course, these are one of the suppressed histories, and stories of these marginalized communities are rarely brought up to the mainstream narrative. So that has been the case overall, but I definitely hope that this year's TPNW definitely brings about that change.
Thank you very much. Yes, we will try to do our best to include this in the agenda, for sure, together, of course, with the consequences and the implications of the nuclear tests. Okay, so no other questions. Oh, okay, I can carry on with the ones I prepared. So for you, Tamatoa, so basically, as I mentioned before, you were Hiroshima G7 youth delegate. And what are your next steps, let's say, to raise awareness of the terrible implications of the nuclear tests? So what are you doing at the moment, and what are you planning to do in the near future? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa, for these questions, and thank you, everyone, Mona Lisa, Bedi, for your presentations as well. I think, from my side, one of the most important, future or prospective steps gonna be finding ways to educate our youth for all the generations here on nuclear testing, and particularly, at different levels, like local, what happened here in French Polynesia, what happened in the Pacific, and then what is happening actually in the world. So those three steps are really, different, but are really complicating. I mean, might be complicated for the youth to reflect on and to, to get the idea of what is really happening around me in this world. But as we have been impacted by nuclear testing, I think it's, an important step to go through. And I think actually I was like, recently talking to some friends of mine who are actually working on nuclear justice. And we're gonna find ways with our institution, like the church, like the partnership with Bedi's institution, and at the international level, to create an educational program for our youth here on the islands. So yes, this is the one of the steps that I'm gonna work on here. And as I was mentioning that I'm a prospective PhD student, so my study is gonna be based on nuclear testing on my islands. So I will study the differences between testimonies of people who have been living through this nuclear period, and also the young generation right now. So 27 years after the last nuclear bomb exploded in Fongatofa, one of the nuclear sites. So yes, this is my kind of involvement in the advocacy institutions, and this is my how can I contribute to my community through the research that I'm gonna conduct through my PhD program. And more like, what is the relationship between testimony and healing, and testimony and reconciliation, and testimony and compensation, and further, how do healing, reconciliation, and compensation overlap, and in what ways do they consequently differ? So this is my main, question or reflection during my PhD program. So yeah, a kind of way on the next, steps to contribute for the community.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I'm glad that you chose a PhD in order to do more research like by yourself, which is really, really important. It's going to be a long journey probably, but I wish you good luck. And I'm sure you will learn a lot from all the people you will be interviewing. So I really think that its contribution will be substantial in the near future, and it's going to be really important also for politicians, or for people involved in policymaking, because they need to read these testimonies. They need to read actually what happened in concrete. So this is really, really important. So good luck with your future endeavor. And then we have a final question for Mona Lisa. Or better, two questions, because I'm curious. Like, second one is really, really nice. So what is the government position towards uranium mining? This is the first one. And the second one is, how did your project start? So could you please share a little bit more on this journey to inspire the others, and to do the same, of course. So yeah, these are the final questions for you. Over to you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for both the questions. To answer your first question, anything related to nuclear or uranium, with whatever sense you take it, is pretty controversial and a taboo, at least in my country, or at least where I'm based currently. So when we're talking about anything nuclear, the question of nationalism, national security comes into picture. So there's this general behavior that nuclear weapons are for the good of its citizen, and it's a legitimate security concern. I know that's the case for most countries, but here you don't get to question it. So of course, what I've noticed for the past few years that I've been engaged in the disarmament space is that we have very few people who are working in the disarmament community, who are based in India at least, and who's doing advocacy work or any sort of research work. So it's a joke that we play around my colleagues who are based in India that I guess we know basically everyone who's working in the field because the number is so less. So talking about government's position is that like what I highlighted in my presentation is that they say that these claims made by the people in Dormia Siat are baseless, and the rising number of cancer cases and water pollution have been brought up over the years by different scientists, both within India and outside, that they don't have enough data and enough research to back them up. And like I also already mentioned, that there are multiple other factors that are in play in this issue, like including racism, insurgent groups, drugs, developmental politics. So all of this makes the process very complex for someone of an outsider to even like wrap our head around it. So in short, the government position is that they don't really like to talk about it. So whether you are trying to maybe just engage a discussion with certain policymakers or who are in that position to give you a proper answer of why have these people not properly rehabilitated, why are the concrete pits which have been leaking since 2020, why is nothing being done in this regard? They don't have an answer. They basically ignore these claims. So that's basically the position of our government, both state and the central government. And to answer your second question of where did the project start, basically I was selected for the Leaders for Tomorrow program back in 2022 March. And we had a 5-month-long training program where we saw the intersectional nature of disarmament, non-proliferation arms control, DNA, with a variety of other topics and issues. So as a result of the training, we are supposed to make a project. And mine was, of course, this Across the Chicken Neck, which was an educational program. And I think one of the participants is in the call today. I'm not sure, but I think I have seen her. So we had 35 participants and from 16 countries over the world. So the participants are not just from indigenous backgrounds, but they were basically based everywhere, include lawyers, nurses, businesswomen, students, just PhD scholars, just people who are just basically enthusiastic and they want to learn more about it. They're part of this program. And yeah, my inspiration basically came from just finding out that the issues that I was facing were not normal, because over the years, in 23 years of my life, they were portrayed in the media and in the society that they were normalized to a level that I thought that this violence and this ignorance is something that I need to grow up with, and that it's completely normal and completely legitimate. But of course, that was not the case, which I realized as I was talking to my colleagues and people in the United Nations Office of Disarmament Affairs, that when I was talking to them about the very complex and very unique things of my region that even they didn't know. So what we see of India is, of course, not the entire picture. India is a very big country and it's very diverse in the most, how would I put this, in the most diverse sense of the word, because there's so many issues and so many problems that are going on, which rarely find mentions in the national or international media. So that was basically my inspiration to start this project, to showcase the problems that have been going on while combining it with the importance of disarmament education among youth. So yeah, I'm glad that the project went well. And then now you can find information about it in the Youth for Disarmament website if you would like to learn more. And you can always contact me if you would like to gain access to the open resource library, like I mentioned. And yeah, that's all.
Okay, many thanks again for your answer. So yes, let's share our resources, let's keep in touch, let's discuss those topics, not only within the community, but also with the people external to the disarmament community, because it's really important. And yeah, I think we are approaching the end of our webinar, first webinar. So remember to keep in touch because there will be more on different topics, of course. And would really like to thank you again, once again, for your presentations. Really, they were extremely inspiring, also for me, actually. And because I didn't know like a lot of I didn't know the details, let's say. So thanks again. And I'm really grateful for having this opportunity of organizing these types of projects, because actually we can bring voices together. For example, we have Tamatoa based in Tahiti, Ayuberi based in the Fiji, Mona Lisa based in India. Then we have Eloisa based in Iran, Sarah based in London, myself based in Prague. So yeah, we are basically located in different parts of the world, but then we came here together. So thank you very much again for dedicating 1 hour of your time, or no, maybe more than 1 hour of your time to do this together. It's very important. So one last information. So basically, yeah, stay updated. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter, please write us or do so on the website. Video recording will be available pretty soon. And yeah, that's it, I guess. So thank you very much again. Also to our audience, and share the link, of course, the YouTube link with your friends, family, I don't know, who is interested in these topics. So yeah, we came to the conclusion, and I really hope to see you soon in one way or another, and to see, I don't know, some participants in our next webinar. So yeah, thank you very much again. So see you, have a good day or night, I don't know, I'm confused. So see you.